Thank you, Jackie, for not mentioning how many years I've been working in this arena. Appreciate it. I really am so happy to be here. I want to thank Dr. Andrade, USHLI. The work that you do in this community is nothing less than legendary. So let's give Dr. Andrade and USHLI and the staff a round of applause. Thank you to all the sponsors. Without you, none of this would happen. Thank you to AT&T, Celeste, one of my dear, dear friends, they are sponsoring my specific speech here today. And thank you to all of you. We have heard so many incredible words of wisdom this morning from so many people. And I love the theme of this breakfast, the Latina Empowerment Breakfast. I like to call it the Badass Latina Breakfast, because that's exactly what it is. Yes, right? Thank you. And there is no better time than now to show just how badass we are. And it is not just critical, but it is an inflection point that we do so. Because nothing less than our future, the future of our families, the future of our babies, is on the line. My daughter turns 13 today. Felicidades, Maya Luna. But I think of that specifically because I understand, as do all of you, just how much is on the line. We mentioned this morning, the ambassador mentioned the Washington Post podcast, and they did this story that hit me to my core because I do have a 13-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. And across the country, thankfully, I live in Washington, D.C., where, and they go to a multicultural school where a lot of this stuff doesn't happen. But I have so many friends who live in purple states and in red states whose children have gone through the bullying that we have been talking about. The build the wall, the go back to where you're from, the speak English. These are words that hurt. And you know that saying that says, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I have never heard anything that is just incredibly untrue. Words do hurt, and words do matter. And so I'm saying all of this to say to you that we have the power to change all of that. We have the power to use our power to make sure that that changes. You know, a lot of the words of wisdom we've heard today, know your power, be prepared, knowledge is power, all of that. Numbers are power. But I gotta tell you, none of that will matter unless we demonstrate that power, and that we demonstrate it in the ways that matter. And this year, there are two very specific, very tangible ways that we can show that power in a way that matters. It's the census, which has also been talked about today, and it's showing up at the ballot box. The census is so incredibly important because this is what determines what kinds of local programs will be in your communities to support our families, to support our young men and women, to support our babies who are just coming up and starting to understand what it means to be a participant in American society. These are all incredibly important because it will indicate how many resources gets allocated to our communities and what kind of leaders we are able to elect. And if we are not able to elect leaders that come from our communities, we will never be able to embrace that power that we have given the numbers that we represent. In terms of the electoral participation, same thing. This year will mark the first year that Latinos will be the largest minority ethnic voting bloc ever. 32 million Latinos will be eligible to vote. Yes, exactly. It is a woo moment. But we have to really make it a woo moment on Election Day. Because what's happening, or what has happened, in 2016, our numbers were also very, very large. But the participation rate was 49%. 49%, mi gente. Can you imagine if 32 million Latinos actually showed up at the ballot box in November? It would be transformational. It would be game over. That is something that would make power uncomfortable, is if 32 million Latinos showed up at the ballot box. And that should be our goal. That should be our goal, because that would then truly represent our community, our power in this country, what we deserve to get as participants in this country, as incredible contributors to this economy, as incredible contributors to our amazing multicultural society, and for people to understand that we are not the other, that we are this country, that we are what makes this country so great. My parents brought my family over from Colombia when I was 2 years old, and they always taught me to have our doors open, to open up our lines of communication. When we moved to neighborhoods where we were the only Latino family there, my parents would invite everyone over on Sunday to have a Colombian-style dinner that my mom would make. They would invite people over during Christmas to pray the novena. And while my father would talk about his history, where we came from, our culture, our customs, by sight, we were very different from all of our guests. But what that allowed our guests to understand is that in reality, we were no different than them. And that was a huge lesson to me as I grew up in politics and as I understood the importance of outreach and the importance of making those personal connections. That is what it's going to take to make sure that our community understands how important it is to participate in the census and to go out and vote. Dr. Andrade and I were talking about it this morning before I came up here, about how all of the political candidates and the political parties do need to understand that they need to make that connection. Because our community has been, especially recently, so attacked and so marginalized, it's easy for candidates and for parties, especially my party, the Democratic Party, to perhaps think that it will be an automatic understanding or fact that our community is going to come out and vote because of what has been done to us. But that is not the case. We cannot take anything for granted. If we are taking anything for granted, that means that we are leaving our power on the table. So I do challenge my party, I do challenge all of the candidates who are running for office to make that connection with our communities, to make them understand their power, to make them understand what's at stake, to make them understand that this is about their future, that this is not some ethereal concept, the concept of voting, that it doesn't matter, that it's just taking time out from your job that perhaps you can't afford, but that this is something that you can't afford not to do. But that connection has got to be made. That conversation has got to be had. That personal touch has got to happen. Because if not, our community is so busy working and surviving and trying to rebuild the American dream, which has been knocked down, especially in the last 3 years, that it is not going to be an automatic connection for us. We have to understand how important it is, and we have to put on the line what is at stake for each and every one of us. When I was talking to my father when I was young, and I saw him really coming up in the world, and he was an engineer, and he was at a company that had no other Latino engineers, and he was made head engineer because of how often he would step up and he would ask for more responsibility, and he would ask for more projects, and he would go to meetings, and he would make himself heard. And so one day I asked him, I was like, Papi, you know, how did you make them see you? How did you feel when they asked you to come to the table of power? And he looked at me and he's like, Mija, no one ever asked me to the table of power. No one ever invited me. I just pulled up a chair. And that has always stood with me, because he's right. If we wait for people to invite us, if we wait for people to pull up our chair, we're going to be waiting a hell of a long time. So pull up a chair, ladies and gentlemen. We need to pull up a chair, especially for this year when we have to participate in the census and when we have to participate at the electoral booth during election day or early vote or whatever it is that we are going to have at local elections, state level elections, and especially the presidential. Because I know it sounds like a cliche, but our vote is our voice, and our voice is our vote. And again, you hear time and again about the sleeping giant and how it's finally waking up, but yet every single year we miss the mark of what our potential could really be. Again, think about it. If we are able to participate at the participation rate of having 32 million Latinos show up at the ballot box, it would be, again, transformational, and it would be like nothing we have ever seen before. And that is when everyone will stand up to take notice. That is when everyone will stop taking our communities for granted. And that is when we will be truly be representative of our power, and when we will be knowing our power. Before we do that, however, we do have to be prepared. And this is something that I tell young people whenever I speak to young people. Be prepared. You don't have to be prepared just for an interview or just for a final exam. Yes, absolutely, you have to be prepared for all of those things. But we should be prepared to make the decisions that I'm talking to you about today. Be prepared in terms of understanding what programs are at stake in your community because of the census. Be prepared to study what the issues that our presidential candidates are talking about. Be prepared to understand what are their positions on the issues that we care about. Don't take anything for granted. Yes, talk to your friends, talk to your families, but do your own research, do your own homework. Don't leave this decision up to somebody else. Make it your own responsibility. That is part of owning your power. That is part of understanding your power. That is what leadership is. And then leadership also means that you take that knowledge elsewhere, because not everybody's going to have the wherewithal to go and do that kind of research. So talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors about how important it is to participate in the census. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors about how important it is to go on election day and vote. Take them with you to go vote. Take them with you to go register to vote, which is the first step. There are so many people now, especially in the last 3 years, that want to see our community fail, that don't want us to show up on election day in the numbers that we represent, and in fact are scared stiff that we might be able to do so. And we see it in the laws and the regulations that they try to pass to make it harder and harder for communities of color and Latinos to register to vote. Voter ID laws are nothing other than a barrier, a border, a wall, and we know how much they love those things, to keep us from knowing our power, from exerting our power. Don't let them do that. Again, do your homework. Understand what it takes to register to vote. It is different in every state. The deadlines are different in every state. The requirements are different in every state. But we have the ability to understand what that is, and we have the ability to make sure that all of our friends understand what those requirements are and bring them along with us. We have to bring our friends and family along with us because we cannot do this alone. We are all in this together. And we know that the Latino community is all about family, is all about extended family, is all about community, neighborhoods, is all about togetherness. So without the support of one another, we can't do this, because this is something that our community is not just counting on all of us to do, but is counting to make sure that we tell the world why we are here, where we're going, and what we're going to do. The through line of all of the words of wisdom that we have heard here this morning goes to, I think, one point, and that is to show this country, to show this president, to show the world who we are and just how badass we can be. Thank you. So I'll just leave you with a couple of other words that I am sure you have heard here today and you will continue to hear. I've said them already, but again, I come from a messaging background, and there's nothing better than message discipline. You got to repeat yourself and repeat yourself and repeat yourself. We have to embrace our power. We have to be prepared, and we have to bring others along with us. And I want to say something specific to the young women in the audience. We have to prove ourselves probably not just double, but triple every day in terms of the things that we are competing against. So we are not, we don't shy away from that kind of challenge. And we should see this as that kind of challenge, because people will be looking to us to fail. That's just a fact. I'm sure you all have lived it. I certainly have lived it in my career. So more than anything, do your homework and understand what it is that you're talking about every single time that you're out there talking to your friends, to your communities, about why it's important to participate in the census, why it's important to go out there and vote. And then one of the other things that I just want to leave you with is this is a time that we are at a crossroads because of everything that our community has endured and will continue to endure if we don't step up to the plate and make the change that we know we have to make. It is critical that all of the candidates, that the parties reach out to us and make those personal connections and make those investments in our communities and have those personal conversations. There's no question that that is critical. But it is also critical for us to take responsibility. And I say that because we're at such an inflection point where if we don't take that responsibility, if we sleep through this, if we sit on our laurels and say, well, if they really want our vote, then, if they really want my vote, then they're gonna call me, they're gonna come and talk to me, then this is just not gonna happen for us. Yes, I hope that they will, and I hope that they will come talk to you, and that they come and woo you, and that they do it time and time again. And if I have anything to do with it, they will. But if they don't, it is still incumbent upon us to show up. Because if there's anything that the 2016 election has taught us, is what happens when we don't show up. So we cannot afford to have this election depend on what others do. No, let's have this election depend on what we do. Because, mi gente, if we don't, if we wait, and if we don't do the hard work of showing up, then we deserve the leaders that get elected. So, mi gente, let's be badass, let's show up, let's make people uncomfortable, let's go do this thing. Sí se puede. Muchas gracias.